The sun hung low over the dusty town of Clearwater, casting long shadows on the quiet streets. The town was small, with only a handful of buildings scattered along the main road, and the sound of boots on the ground echoed louder than the rumble of any motor. Jake, a cowboy through and through, had lived in Clearwater his whole life. He knew everyone, their stories, their habits, and their favorite meals at the diner. Every morning he'd stop by the diner for his usual breakfast, a hot cup of coffee and a thick slice of bacon, and then he'd be on his way, tending to his ranch, caring for his horses, and handling his business. It was just another quiet morning, or so Jake thought. As Jake pushed open the door to the diner, the bell chimed above him, and the warmth of the room greeted him like an old friend. The smell of fried food and fresh coffee hung in the air. The diner was cozy, filled with wooden tables and worn leather seats, each one marked by years of use. Behind the counter, Mary, the waitress, greeted him with a smile, but it wasn't long before his attention was caught by someone he hadn't seen before. A woman sat alone at the counter, her hands folded neatly in front of her. She looked out of place in this small town, her clothes a bit too fine for Clearwater. She wore a faded blue dress and her brown hair was tied back loosely, as if she hadn't cared to style it much. Her eyes, though, were what caught Jake's attention. They were tired, as if they had seen too much of the world and not enough of the good in it. Her face was calm, but there was an emptiness in her gaze, a sadness that Jake couldn't quite place. She wasn't the type to strike up a conversation with anyone, and Jake, being the kind of man who liked to keep to himself, almost didn't approach her. But something about her made him pause. He hadn't seen many strangers in Clearwater, especially not women. Curious, he walked up to her. "Looks like you're new around here," Jake said with a smile, tipping his hat slightly as he spoke. His voice was friendly, but there was a hint of hesitation in it. He wasn't used to speaking with strangers. The woman looked up, startled for a moment, then offered a faint smile in return. "Just passing through," she said, her voice soft but steady. She looked down at her hands before adding, "I'm Clara." Jake nodded, taking a seat next to her at the counter. "Jake, nice to meet you, Clara. What can I get you?" Clara glanced at the menu, but then her eyes drifted to the plate of eggs and bacon in front of Jake. He hadn't even noticed, but the way she looked at the food told him everything he needed to know. She was hungry. "Really hungry?" She nodded toward the menu. "I'll have whatever's easiest." "I'm not too picky." Jake flagged down Mary, who came over with a warm smile. "A plate of eggs and bacon for the lady?" Mary asked, already reaching for the pan. Clara gave a small nod, and within moments the meal was placed before her. She didn't hesitate. Without saying another word, Clara dug into the food, her movements swift and focused. She didn't look up. She didn't make small talk. Jake, unsure of what to say, sipped his coffee and watched her. He noticed how quickly she ate, as if the food was more than just a meal to her. She wasn't savoring it. She wasn't enjoying it. She was simply consuming it. Jake sat quietly for a moment, unsure if he should say anything. He wasn't the type to pry into people's business, but something about this woman, about the way she seemed to be lost in her own world, made him want to help. He had seen plenty of folks come through Clearwater, some hungry from a long journey, others just looking for a place to rest. But this woman, there was something different about her. It wasn't just the hunger for food. It was something deeper. "So what brings you to Clearwater?" Jake asked finally, trying to break the silence. Clara paused for a second, fork halfway to her mouth. She glanced at him, her eyes softening slightly, but then she quickly returned to her meal. "Just looking for something," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Been traveling for a long time now." Jake raised an eyebrow. "A long time? You sure do look like you've been on the road for a while." He chuckled lightly, trying to make the conversation less heavy. Clara gave him a small smile, but it didn't quite reach her eyes. I've been searching, but nothing seems to fill the emptiness." The words hung in the air for a moment, and Jake felt an odd weight settle in his chest. What did she mean by emptiness? Was she talking about the hunger for food, or was it something more? But before he could ask, Clara had finished her plate and pushed it aside. She sat back, folding her hands once more on the counter, her eyes downcast. Jake wasn't sure what to say next. He hadn't meant to make things awkward, but he could tell there was more to this woman than met the eye. She wasn't just hungry for food. There was something else going on, something she wasn't ready to share. He could feel it in his bones, but he also knew that people had their reasons for keeping things to themselves. "Well, I'm glad you're getting something to eat," Jake said with a warm smile. "This town isn't much, but the food's good." Clara looked up at him then, her eyes still tired but holding something else now. A glimmer of hope, or maybe just a flicker of gratitude for the first kind words someone had offered her in a while. She gave him a small nod. "Thank you, Jake. It's nice to find a place like this." Jake smiled back, feeling a sense of connection he hadn't expected. There was something about her, something he couldn't put into words. He wasn't sure what it was, but it made him want to stick around to keep talking to her. Maybe it was just because she was different. Maybe it was because she reminded him of someone he'd once known, but whatever it was, Jake couldn't shake the feeling that this woman was searching for more than just a meal. As Clara got up to leave, she turned to Jake. "I'll be heading out soon," she said softly. "But it was nice to talk to you." Jake nodded, tipping his hat once again. "Same here, Clara. Safe travels." She smiled at him once more before walking out the door, disappearing into the quiet streets of Clearwater. Jake watched her go, a feeling of unease settling in his stomach. He didn't know it then, but that moment, just a simple encounter over a meal, would be the beginning of something neither of them had expected. The days passed slowly in Clearwater, but something had shifted in the air since Clara's first visit to the diner. Jake found himself looking out for her whenever he walked in, wondering if she would return. He wasn't sure what had drawn him to her. Perhaps it was the way she carried herself or the sadness in her eyes that spoke louder than words. But every day that she didn't show up, he felt a strange sense of disappointment. On the fourth day after their first meeting, Jake stepped into the diner for his usual breakfast. He glanced around, half expecting to see Clara sitting at the counter, but there was no sign of her. He felt a pang of curiosity mixed with worry. Maybe she had moved on, like so many others who had passed through Clearwater never to return. As Jake settled into his usual seat at the counter, Mary, the waitress, came over with a warm smile. "Same as usual, Jake?" Jake nodded, distracted. "Yeah, but have you seen the lady who was here the other day, Clara?" Mary raised an eyebrow, her hands already reaching for the coffee pot. "Clara? Oh, she's been back. Came in yesterday for lunch, but she didn't stay long. Looked like she had somewhere else to be." Jake's heart sank a little. He hadn't expected to feel this way about someone he barely knew. But the thought of Clara leaving town so soon made him feel strangely unsettled. "Did she say anything about where she was going?" he asked, trying to keep his voice casual. Mary shook her head. "Nope, just said she was looking for something. Seems like she's got a lot on her mind. But she's tough, she'll be fine." Jake didn't know why, but something told him he needed to find Clara. Maybe it was because he hadn't been able to stop thinking about their conversation. Or maybe it was because he could sense there was more to her story than she had let on. Either way, he knew he couldn't just let her slip away without knowing the truth. After finishing his meal, Jake left a tip and made his way outside. The sun was shining bright, and the streets of Clearwater were quieter than usual, with only a few people strolling along the sidewalks. Jake walked toward the small town square, scanning the area for any sign of Clara. He had no idea where she could be, but he felt the pull to find her. He had to know more about her, to understand what had been eating away at her. As he passed the local market, he spotted her. Clara was standing near a small bench, gazing out at the horizon as if lost in thought. Her shoulders slumped, and for a moment Jake couldn't help but feel like he was seeing her at her most vulnerable. She didn't see him coming, and for a brief moment Jake hesitated. He didn't want to intrude, but he couldn't ignore the urge to talk to her again. "Clara?" Jake called out softly, not wanting to startle her. She turned around, her expression softening when she saw him. "Jake," she said, a small smile tugging at the corner of her lips. "I didn't expect to see you out here." Jake smiled back, though he could feel his heart racing. "I could say the same. I've been looking for you, actually." Clara raised an eyebrow, curious but guarded. "Looking for me? Why?" Jake paused, unsure of how to explain. "I don't know. I guess. I've been thinking about our conversation, about what you said." He took a step closer. "You're looking for something, and I'm wondering if I can help." Clara's eyes flickered with something, surprise maybe, or disbelief. She shook her head slightly, but her voice was soft when she spoke. "I don't think you can, Jake. I've been looking for something for so long, but I'm not sure I even know what it is anymore." Jake took another step forward, his expression serious. "Maybe I don't know exactly what you're searching for, but I do know that you don't have to keep it to yourself. It's clear that something's been weighing on you." Clara glanced away, her eyes searching the distance as if trying to find the right words. After a long pause, she finally spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. "I've lost a lot, Jake. My family, my home, my sense of who I am. I've been trying to fill that emptiness inside with anything I can. I thought maybe if I kept moving, kept searching, I'd find what I needed. But it's not working." Jake stood there listening intently, his heart aching for her. "Clara, I'm sorry. I can't pretend to know what it's like to go through something like that, but I do know this. You don't have to carry it all alone. You're not the only one who's lost something." Clara met his gaze, her eyes filled with a mixture of gratitude and hesitation. "I've been alone for so long, Jake. It's hard to imagine that anyone would want to share that burden with me. I've learned to keep people at a distance." Jake nodded, understanding. He knew what it felt like to shut others out, to put up walls and pretend everything was fine when it wasn't. "I get that," he said quietly. "But I'm here if you want to talk. You don't have to be alone anymore." For a moment, Clara just stood there, her emotions swirling inside her. She seemed torn between wanting to accept his offer of comfort and pushing him away to protect herself from further pain. Jake could see the struggle in her eyes, and for the first time, he realized just how much she had been hiding. Finally, Clara spoke, her voice breaking slightly. "I don't know what to do, Jake. I thought maybe if I kept moving I'd leave the pain behind. But I don't know how to stop. I don't know how to feel anything but empty." Jake reached out, gently placing a hand on her shoulder. "It's okay to stop, Clara. You don't have to keep running. Sometimes the hardest thing is letting yourself feel again." Clara looked at him, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. She was vulnerable, raw, and for the first time in a long while she felt like maybe, just maybe, she could trust someone again. She nodded, a tear slipping down her cheek. "I don't know where this journey is going, Jake, but I think I might need help finding my way." Jake smiled softly, his heart swelling with a mixture of relief and something deeper. "You don't have to do it alone, Clara. I'm here, and I'm not going anywhere." As they stood there, a quiet understanding passed between them. Jake didn't have all the answers, but he knew that sometimes just being there for someone was enough. Clara wasn't alone anymore, and for the first time in a long while, she felt a small flicker of hope stirring within her. A hope that maybe, just maybe, this hunger she felt could be filled in ways she hadn't expected. After that day in the town square, things between Jake and Clara began to shift in a way neither of them had expected. It started with small moments, exchanges of smiles, casual conversations, and an unspoken understanding that grew between them. Jake found himself thinking about her more and more, his mind wandering to their talks, the quiet moments shared under the wide-open sky. He didn't know what was happening, but something deep inside him told him he needed to be there for her, just as much as she needed someone to listen. Clara began returning to the diner more often. At first, she would come in during the quiet hours of the morning, when the sun was just beginning to rise and the streets of Clearwater still felt untouched by the day. She would sit at the counter, often alone, with a cup of coffee and a plate of eggs, her fingers lightly tapping the surface of the mug, as if she was lost in thought. Jake would make it a point to come by at those times, offering her a friendly smile and a kind word. It was during these early morning hours that they began to talk more, really talk, about things neither of them had expected to share. Clara started opening up in ways she hadn't done with anyone in a long time. She told Jake about the many places she had traveled to, always searching for something that seemed just out of reach. She spoke of the days spent working on a farm in Montana, where the land felt like home, but the people didn't. She spoke of a failed relationship, one that left her feeling as though she wasn't enough, that she could never live up to someone's expectations. And then there was the family, her family who had once been her world but had fallen apart, leaving her with nothing but memories. Jake listened, truly listened, to every word. He didn't interrupt. He didn't offer advice or try to fix things. He just let her speak, understanding the weight of the stories she carried. He could see the pain in her eyes, but he also saw something else, a quiet strength that she had hidden deep inside her. A part of her that still yearned for connection, for love, but had been buried under years of loss and heartache. On the other hand, Jake also found himself sharing things he had kept locked away for years. His voice was rough at times, but Clara always listened, her presence steady and comforting. He talked about growing up on the ranch, how he had always been the quiet, independent type who didn't ask for help and didn't need anyone. But there had been a time years ago when he had let someone in, someone he had loved with all his heart. She had left, though, and Jake hadn't been the same since. The hurt from that loss was still there, a part of him he had buried. But every now and then it would surface, especially when he found himself drawn to someone like Clara. The more they shared, the more their connection deepened. They began to rely on each other in ways neither had anticipated. Clara would stop by the diner to sit with Jake on the days when she felt the weight of her journey pressed too hard against her heart. And Jake would find himself waiting for those moments, eager to hear her thoughts, to offer her a quiet space where she didn't have to carry the world on her shoulders alone. One afternoon, as they sat together in the diner, Clara looked out the window at the sky, her thoughts distant. "Jake," she said quietly, her voice hesitant. "I've been thinking a lot lately about the choices I've made. I thought I was doing the right thing by leaving everything behind, but now I don't know if it was the right thing after all." Jake put down his coffee mug and gave her his full attention. He didn't rush her, allowing her the space to find the words. "It's okay to have doubts, Clara. Life isn't a straight path. We all make choices that lead us down different roads." Clara nodded, but the sadness in her eyes lingered. "I thought I was escaping from the hurt. But it's like no matter where I go, I take that hurt with me. It's always there, just under the surface. And the more I run from it, the more it chases me." Jake sat quietly for a moment, letting her words sink in. He knew exactly what she meant. He had spent years running from his own pain, pretending it wasn't there, convincing himself that he didn't need anyone. But Clara had shown him that running away didn't make the pain go away. It only made it worse. "You don't have to run anymore," Jake said, his voice soft but firm. "You're not alone in this. I'm here for you, and you don't have to carry it all on your own." Clara looked at him, her eyes searching his face as if trying to understand the depth of his words. For a moment she didn't say anything. Then slowly she reached out and placed her hand over his on the counter. The touch was simple, but it spoke volumes. It was the kind of gesture that said more than words could ever express. "I don't know if I'm ready to stop running yet," she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. "But maybe I can try." Jake gave her a small smile, a sense of warmth spreading through him. "You don't have to figure it all out today. Just take it one step at a time. And if you ever need someone to talk to, or even just someone to sit with you in silence, I'll be here." The air between them was filled with a quiet understanding, a bond that had grown stronger with each passing day. Clara wasn't ready to let go of her past completely, but she was starting to let down the walls she had built around her heart. And Jake, who had once been closed off from the world, found himself opening up in ways he hadn't thought possible. For the first time in years, he felt like he wasn't just living for himself but for someone else. Over the following days, Clara's visits became more frequent. She no longer came to the diner just to eat. She came to talk, to share her thoughts, and to find comfort in Jake's company. And Jake began to look forward to these moments as much as she did, finding a sense of peace in her presence. They spent hours talking about their lives, their pasts, their hopes, and their fears. And in those conversations they began to heal slowly but surely. Clara was no longer the woman who had arrived in Clearwater, lost and unsure of where she was headed. She was beginning to rediscover herself piece by piece, and Jake, who had once believed he didn't need anyone, found himself more connected to Clara than he had ever been to anyone in his life. They weren't there yet, not by a long shot, but they had taken the first steps together, and that was enough for now. The hunger that had once driven them both in different ways, Clara's for connection and Jake's for peace, was slowly being filled, not by answers, but by the quiet understanding they had found in each other. It was a crisp morning when Clara returned to the diner, and Jake immediately noticed something different about her. There was a softness in her eyes, a quiet calm that hadn't been there before. She wasn't as rushed or guarded as she had been in their earlier meetings. She walked in slowly, almost as if she was savoring the moment, her movements more relaxed. Jake had just finished his breakfast, but when he saw her, he stood up and made his way over to her, his heart racing a little. He had been thinking about her, wondering how she was doing after their last conversation. He had seen her open up in ways that surprised him, but he still felt like there was more she hadn't said, more that she was holding back. "Morning, Clara," Jake greeted her with a smile, his voice warm. Clara looked up from the menu, her face lighting up when she saw him. "Morning, Jake," she said, and there was a hint of something in her voice, something deeper than just politeness. "I was hoping you'd be here." Jake raised an eyebrow, a small smile tugging at the corner of his lips. "Well, you're in luck. I was just finishing up. You want the usual?" She nodded, and as Jake called over to Mary to order, he couldn't help but feel a sense of anticipation. This wasn't just another day. It felt like something had shifted between them, something important, and he couldn't deny that he was eager to see where it would lead. As they sat down together, Clara's expression was more open, her body language less guarded. She no longer had the tired, worn-out look that had once haunted her face. She seemed lighter, as though the weight she had carried for so long was starting to lift, even if just a little. "I've been thinking a lot," Clara began, her voice quiet but steady. "About what you said the other day, about not running anymore." Jake listened intently, leaning in slightly. "And what have you decided?" he asked, his voice gentle, knowing that whatever she said next would be important. Clara took a deep breath, her fingers tracing the rim of her coffee cup. She seemed to be gathering her thoughts, choosing her words carefully. "I think I've been running from myself, Jake. I've been hiding behind all these excuses and stories in my head, telling myself that I had to keep moving or else I'd get stuck. But the truth is, I don't know where I'm going anymore, and I don't know if I can keep running." Jake nodded, understanding exactly what she meant. He had been there himself, caught in a cycle of moving forward without ever stopping to really look at what was ahead. He had buried himself in his work, in his routine, thinking it would keep the pain at bay. But eventually he realized that facing it was the only way to truly heal. "You don't have to run, Clara," Jake said softly, his eyes locking with hers. "You can stop. Right here. Right now. You don't have to go anywhere until you're ready." For a moment, Clara didn't speak. She just stared at him, her eyes searching his face as if trying to understand the depth of his words. Jake felt the weight of her gaze, but he didn't look away. He didn't need to. He had said what he needed to say, and he meant every word. Finally, Clara looked down at the table, her fingers tightening around her cup. "I've been afraid, Jake. Afraid that if I stop running, if I stay in one place for too long, I'll have to face everything I've been avoiding. The pain, the loss, the loneliness." Jake reached out, his hand resting lightly on top of hers. "I know it's hard, but you don't have to face it alone. Not anymore. You don't have to do this by yourself." Clara looked up at him, her eyes filled with emotion. She opened her mouth to speak, but for a moment no words came out. Instead, she let out a shaky breath and a tear slipped down her cheek. Jake's heart ached at the sight, but he didn't pull away. He simply squeezed her hand gently, offering her the quiet comfort of his presence. "I've never let anyone get this close before," Clara whispered, her voice trembling. "I've always kept everyone at arm's length, including myself. I thought if I didn't care, if I didn't let anyone in, it wouldn't hurt so much when they left." Jake's chest tightened at her words. He understood that pain all too well. He had kept his distance from the world for years, afraid of being hurt again, afraid of trusting someone else with his heart. But now, sitting beside Clara, he realized just how lonely that choice had made him. "You don't have to be afraid, Clara," Jake said quietly. "I'm not going anywhere. You don't have to push me away." Clara nodded slowly, wiping the tear from her cheek with the back of her hand. "I know," she whispered. "I'm trying to believe that. It's hard to let go of everything I've been holding on to for so long." Jake gave her a soft smile, his thumb brushing lightly across her hand. "It's okay. Letting go takes time, but you don't have to do it all at once. Just take it one step at a time." Clara took another deep breath, looking up at him with a mixture of gratitude and uncertainty. I think I'm ready to try, to stop running at least for a little while." Jake's smile grew a little wider, a sense of relief washing over him. "That's all I'm asking. You don't have to figure everything out today. Just take it slow and we'll see where it goes." As they sat there together, the noise of the diner faded into the background. Clara felt a weight lift from her shoulders, one that she hadn't realized was there until now. She wasn't sure what the future held, but for the first time in a long time she didn't feel so afraid. She didn't feel so alone, and Jake, sitting next to her, realized that he wasn't just offering her comfort. He was also offering himself something he hadn't known he needed, the chance to be close to someone again. To open up, to trust, and to let someone in. They spent the rest of the morning talking, not about anything in particular, but about everything and nothing. The conversation flowed easily between them, each word a small step toward healing, toward finding the connection they both longed for but hadn't known how to reach. By the time Clara left the diner, she felt different, not fully healed, not by a long shot, but lighter, freer. She had taken the first step toward facing the things she had spent so many years running from. And as she walked out into the sunlight, she didn't feel the same weight of loneliness that had always followed her. For the first time, she felt like maybe, just maybe, she could finally stop running. Jake watched her go, his heart swelling with a mixture of pride and hope. He knew the road ahead wouldn't be easy, but it didn't have to be. As long as they were both willing to take it one step at a time, together they would find a way to make it through. The days began to blur together, but they no longer felt as empty. Clara had stayed in Clearwater longer than she had expected, and with each passing day, she found herself growing more attached to the small town and, more importantly, to Jake. The quiet rhythm of life in the diner, the shared moments and the conversations they had been having over coffee and meals, had begun to feel like a new kind of home, a place where she could breathe, where she could let down her guard. Jake had become a constant in her life, not just the man who owned the diner, but someone who understood her in ways no one else ever had. He didn't rush her to open up, didn't demand answers to questions she wasn't ready to face. He simply sat with her, listened, and let her take things at her own pace. It was something she had never experienced before, and it was slowly but surely making her realize just how much she had been holding back. That morning, as Clara walked into the diner, she noticed a difference in herself. She wasn't carrying that heavy feeling of being lost. The emptiness that had once consumed her was still there, but it no longer felt like an unbearable weight. She had started to accept that healing wasn't about erasing the past. It was about learning to live with it and finding new strength in the process. "Good morning, Jake," she greeted him, her voice lighter than it had been in weeks. Jake looked up from behind the counter and gave her a smile that made her heart flutter. "Morning, Clara," he replied, his voice warm and inviting. "I saved you a seat." "You want the usual?" Clara smiled and nodded, settling down at the counter. The scent of fresh coffee and sizzling bacon filled the air, creating a sense of comfort that she had come to look forward to every day. As Mary prepared her breakfast, Clara turned her attention back to Jake, who was wiping down the counter with a cloth. "I've been thinking," Clara began, her fingers tracing the edge of her cup, "about what comes next." Jake paused in his task, giving her his full attention. He had noticed the change in her over the past few days, the way her shoulders were no longer slumped and how her eyes were brighter. She wasn't just surviving anymore, she was beginning to live again. "What do you mean?" Jake asked, his voice curious but calm. Clara took a deep breath before speaking again. I think I'm ready to stay here, for a while at least. I've been running for so long, trying to outrun all the pain, the memories. But I'm starting to see that maybe I don't need to run anymore. Maybe the thing I've been looking for wasn't out there somewhere. Maybe it's right here." Jake's heart warmed at her words. It wasn't just about staying in Clearwater. It was about staying with him. For a long time, he had believed that healing came from distance, from moving away from the things that hurt. But Clara had shown him that sometimes healing came from moving closer to people, to the connections that could help carry the weight of the past. "I'm glad to hear that." "Clara," Jake said softly, his voice filled with sincerity, "you don't have to run anymore. You've found a place here, a place where you can just be, and I'm here. You don't have to face any of this alone." Clara felt a warmth spread through her chest at his words. There had been so many times when she had felt completely alone, as if no one could understand what she had been through. But Jake had been there for her, showing her the power of just being present, of offering a quiet kind of support. It was more than she had ever asked for, and it was enough. Mary set down a plate of eggs and bacon in front of Clara, and she thanked her with a smile. She took a bite of the food, savoring the simple pleasure of the meal. It was something she had taken for granted before, but now she found herself appreciating the little things, the comfort of a hot meal, the calm rhythm of the day, the fact that she wasn't alone. As they ate, Jake and Clara continued talking, the conversation flowing easily between them. They spoke about their pasts, their dreams, and their hopes for the future. Clara shared more of her story, and Jake listened with the same patience he had always shown. But now the weight of her words didn't feel as heavy. She wasn't carrying the same burden that had once kept her quiet. Later that afternoon, after the diner had quieted down, Jake and Clara went for a walk through the town. The sun was beginning to set, casting a golden glow over the streets. The air was cool, and the sounds of the town were distant, replaced by the quiet rhythm of their steps. "This town's smaller than I'm used to," Clara said as they walked side by side, her voice thoughtful, "but I think I'm starting to like it here. It's peaceful." Jake glanced over at her, a small smile on his face. "Yeah, it's quiet, but there's a kind of peace in that. Not everything has to be loud or busy to be good." Clara nodded, feeling the truth of his words. She had spent so many years running, looking for something bigger, something grander, but what she had needed all along was something simple, something steady. And Clearwater, with all its quiet charm, had given her that. As they reached the small park at the edge of town, Jake stopped and turned to her. "Clara, I know things haven't been easy for you, and I'm not asking for anything, but I just want you to know that if you're ready, if you want to be here, you've got a place. You've got me." Clara looked up at him, her heart swelling with emotion. The words she had been holding back for so long finally found their way to her lips. "I think I'm ready, Jake. I think I'm ready to stop running. And I think I'm ready to be here, with you." Jake's smile grew, and for the first time in a long time, he felt a sense of contentment settle over him. They weren't perfect. They didn't have all the answers. But they had each other, and that was enough. Together they had begun a new chapter. A chapter that wasn't defined by their pasts, but by what they were willing to build together. Clara had found a new kind of hunger, one that wasn't about running or filling the emptiness with distractions. She had found a hunger for connection, for trust, and for the simple, steady love that Jake had quietly offered her. And in turn, Jake had discovered that sometimes the greatest healing came not from running away from the pain, but from moving through it, side by side with someone who cared. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting the world in soft hues of pink and gold, Jake and Clara stood together, their hands intertwined, ready to face whatever came next, not as two individuals, but as two people who had found something worth holding on to.